All right, so Charn McAllister, thank you very much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited for this.
Me too. I'm excited to see where we go. We're just talking about how we want to take a little bit deeper dives. I feel like some of the earlier conversations I had were they were great, but they were a little choppier than I'd like. So I really, like we said, just the camera's not there. Let's just talk, man.
That's the way to do it. I think our first start of our relationship was, I think, at the jiu-jitsu studio. We were just sitting next to each other and we started having a conversation about a mutual friend, Eric, I think, because I just found out he was getting married. And I think that was when we really first started talking.
I think you're right.
And we've just had lots of genuine conversations since then. So no reason this can't be the same, you know?
I love it. Yeah. I think that's exactly what I'm looking for. Because I think as I've reflected back, I'm like, a lot of the value that I want to share with an audience is just those authentic conversations that we have at a gym and taking a little deeper dive on a couple of subjects and seeing if I know there's value. There's value to be learned from so many experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the authenticity part is huge. I was teaching on Tuesday and Thursday this week. I was teaching my students about authenticity. So I teach a leadership class, and it's a big topic. And I'll tell you that over the years, having taught this class now for 11, 12 years, authenticity was pushed back on by students for a long time. But over the years, they've been more accepting of it. I don't know if it's a generational change, but students now, I think, are more willing to be like, yeah, authenticity is a good thing. I'm allowed to bring myself to the workplace. Whereas I think our generation and generations before us, that was not the case. You bring what you're supposed to be to the workplace. And so it's actually kind of cool that the world is more accepting of authenticity now and allowing people to be themselves. So super stoked that you're doing it this way too, because some podcasts are not like that. You gotta be polished the whole time.
Yeah, and I understand, right? Like some structures, you do need that structure in a business or a military environment. Sometimes, like you do need that. And then on the other side, though, I think the real lessons are when you can be raw. I mean, it's more difficult sometimes, but if you're willing to just be your true self, then I think it resonates with others. And I think connections built a lot faster too.
This is why I'm having you coming as a guest speaker this semester, because I want you to back up these things. I think that's true. I would even say in the military, authenticity is good too. And I say to my students, it's easy for me as a 40-year-old to be like, you should be your authentic self when I've had 20 years of career behind me. It's a lot harder for them. To be very honest, like I show them a picture. I say, this is an embarrassing photo. It's a picture of me and my then girlfriend in college. And I'm wearing a pair of shorts in the video. And I had just shown them a picture where I'm wearing these awful black and white camouflage pants that weren't cool in the 90s and are still not cool now, right? And I say, in this photo, if you had seen it 10 minutes beforehand, I was wearing those pants. She came into my room and was like, I refuse to go on a date with you if you're wearing those pants. You will change into something more acceptable for me, And what I think when I think about authenticity and what these students are thinking of is they've in many ways been policed in their jobs as young workers, whether it be in high school or now in college. And they're excited about this idea of possibly bringing forward themselves into the workplace. And you do make that authentic connection. And so even if it's in the military where there is a certain standard of professionalism or discipline, I've shared stories with my soldiers that I think were authentic at the time that helped like illuminate my character, or to share with them like, hey, I may be your leader here, but I want to open up to you so you feel comfortable opening up to me as well, to get to the heart of things.
Absolutely. I think when you share it yourself, then others are more likely to do the same. It shows that it's a safe space to be able to do that.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons I show that photo. It's not it's a little embarrassing because it's me at like 20, in my dorm room or barracks room, as it were. And, though, the thing that happens is students start sharing their own stories. Funny enough, one of the students in my class this year probably asked one of the most insightful questions. She goes, if you were all about authenticity, why did you change your pants for the girl? And I was like, because I wanted to go on a date with her. It's a pretty easy one there. And I said, I'm telling you about authenticity and how important it is, but I try to be very honest with them and authentic. Like, that's not always who I was. Like, I didn't have that advice. I think authenticity is a relatively new concept. And not that we haven't had that idea, but talking about authenticity in particular is new. And I wasn't always authentic as a leader. Like, let's be real. We've all had those things that we've faked to a certain extent. But I think it is about telling people early on in their careers that what things I wish I had heard, which is be yourself. Like, it's okay, because that was not necessarily like what my time at West Point was about. Like, it was not about, hey, just be yourself. There was a very particular type of leader I think they wanted to create. And you pick up on that very quickly there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's so many questions that come to mind. The first, though, that we have to cover, because I know a little more about you, but you just mentioned West Point, military, students. Can you give us some background? Can you tell us about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Right after high school, I went to West Point. While I was there, I was lucky enough to meet my lovely wife, Michelle. So we were cadets together. We started dating what we call your cow year, which is your junior year. And after graduation, I went to flight school at Fort Rucker, Alabama. I became a Kiowa Warrior pilot, which is a scout reconnaissance helicopter. And right around that time, Michelle, my wife, had deployed to Iraq herself as a communications officer. She was medevaced out of Iraq and was discharged from the Army at that time. As soon as she was done, we were together for like 6 months, got married real quick. And then I went to Iraq for a 15-month tour as a platoon leader, Scout Weapons Team platoon leader. And then as an executive officer, came back. I was a commander. Went back to Iraq again for another 12 months as a commander for 2 different units. I was a C Troop, Line Troop commander for helicopters, then a headquarters commander. And then came back, did the transition like you've been talking about transitions in your book and in your life. Went from big switch from military to academia. Went to Florida State to get my PhD in management and organizational psychology, essentially is what it is. And I've been doing that and teaching leadership for the last, I guess, 11 years. Well, I started PhD in 2012, so it's been a long time now. I guess 14 years. It's a long time. It's a lot, man. Yeah, that's like a super long overview of all of it.
I just got chills. Seriously. Like, the camera. Got chills. I knew that you had some experience. I don't think we've taken, and that was very surface level, and I didn't know half of what you just said.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you've done it, I've done it. You know, you don't need to go into too much detail unless we're in, I guess, a setting like this. And definitely a big part of my life being in the military. You know, and going to West Point. I just went to my 20-year reunion, and that was in November. Just an incredible experience. We graduated with 911 people in my class from West Point, and which is interesting. We were the class of 9/11. So like Time Magazine did a whole article on our class because we were the class that was freshmen. We were freshmen at West Point, or plebes, when 9/11 happened. And so that was a tag noted onto us. And so we graduated. We started with 1,198 cadets, our first basic training in July of 2001. And then we graduated 911. And to this day, I'm convinced that there were like 912, 913. They just kicked 2 hours just to fit the narrative. That's something West Point would do, just to make sure they had the 911 cadets.
Wow.
So, but yeah, I should say there were 450 of our classmates at the 20th reunion, which was really impressive. And with families, there was over 1,000 people. So it was really cool to go back to the academy, not be scared of all the people there who were going to yell at you for doing whatever. And just get to see people that I hadn't seen since Iraq or even since I was a cadet. And some of them have their own cadets now, right? Like last time I saw them was on graduation day, and now their kids are plebes, which is just crazy to think about.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So I've got to go back to the beginning. How do you get into West Point?
Yeah. I mean, I'll say based on your book, which I loved, by the way,
thank you. And by the way, I know you have a copy, but you don't have
a signed copy.
Signed.
I brought my book to get signed. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate this. I brought my copy just because I didn't have a signed copy because I didn't want to bother you after the talk. But thank you so much. I appreciate this. I thought about this a lot when I was preparing for the interview. This idea that you're not self-made. It's often the people around you, right, who make you who you are. And so when I was in high school, I should say, you go back to like 80s movies, they're just like inspirational in the cheesiest of ways, right? If you watch Karate Kid, you can't want to, like when I wanted my son to get into martial arts, I showed him Karate Kid, and that's why our kids now do jiu-jitsu together. Ralph Macchio made it happen for us.
Love it.
But when you watch 80s movies, they're cheesy, but as a kid, they're real. And I just wanted to be that. I wanted to be like, I don't want to say a hero. That's not, like, I mean this in like the child sense of like, you want to do something good and right. And I'd even say, although video games were very different in the late 80s, early 90s, like I had this idea that I wanted to do something that was like helping, right? And I was a Boy Scout as well. And I took all those things very seriously. I can still give you the Scout oath and law and all those things. And I really believed in those things. So when I got to high school, the military started becoming a potential option. And then I was super lucky to have, as an Algebra 2 teacher, my sophomore year, Mr. Frank Ladonna, who ended up retiring as a general, passed away about 8 years ago from a heart attack. But he was someone who inspired me. He had been a pilot. And not that I wanted to do pilot, but when you're 16 and a boy, all you want to do is special forces or Rangers, right? Like that's all you want to do. Although it's open to men and women now. But at the time, that's all I wanted to do. And he kind of gave me a lot of guidance along the way. And he was like, this would be a great opportunity for you. You should really think about it. And so from sophomore year on, all I thought about was going to West Point. Like my entire life was focused around how can I be competitive? And one of the common themes that I look at in my life is this idea of like idealism. And I'm a very idealistic person. My students will tell you this. Some of my students will tell you that I'm naive and not ideal. And I think there's a very thin line between idealism and naivety. And I would consider that line as the word is hope, right? Naivety is just believing everyone's going to do the right thing. Idealism is hoping people do the right thing, right? And so one of the things I share that story because I had childhood asthma, and that's an automatic disqualification from the military and particularly from West Point. And my mentor, Mr. Lodano, said, look, this is the 90s, remember, you can take medical records out because there's no electronic records. He's like, take all of your medical records that mention asthma out of your medical records before signing them to West Point. And I said, I can't do that. Like, I can't do that because this is a school based on honor and integrity. And I should say I had like a very big complex. I was like, I could never go there. These people are going to be smarter than me, faster than me, bigger than me, better than me in every way, right? So I had this complex about that because they just seem larger than life, all these cadets. And as I moved through the process, I think it was Parade magazine back then, used to come in the Sunday paper, did like a whole expose on West Point and cadets, right? So I had all this information. Little did I know I would end up being in the company they exposed. So everyone that was leading you were the people I'd seen in the newspaper and looked up to unintentionally, which even made it more like imposing. But I decided not to take my medical records out. And it was, I thought about what to say ahead of time as I was preparing for this. And I do think it was a bad decision. It was the right ethical decision, probably. Here's the thing. I got accepted to West Point early admission in September. I had taken my SAT like 5 times to get to the score required for early admission. I had all the sports. I had all the activities. And so I got early admission, and then the medical examination came out, and it was on December 23rd. I don't know why anyone was working on December 23rd, but they disqualified me from West Point, Naval Academy, Air Force Academy, everything on that day. And that was like heartbreaking, right? Because here I am, September of my senior year. I know where I'm going to school. I'm going to West Point. Like, this is all I wanted. It had all come true at an early part. And like you said, how do you get there? It's a long process. You got to get a nomination from a congressman or a senator. And that's super competitive. And so I actually ended up getting my senator's nomination. So one of the only 2 in Florida, which I was super lucky to get that. And I remember walking into that room, had never done JROTC, which I did join my senior year, but like at that time, I'd never done any of those things. And I walk in there, these kids in uniforms. I don't really have any military in my family. I have no idea like what I'm doing. And so I was just felt like outgunned the whole time. So I'd done all this. I get denied medically from West Point, and it was heartbreaking, right? And so the organization that will overturn that is called the Department of Defense Medical Examination Review Board. And in the 90s, I had that number memorized, and I would call that number every day. Any updates on my status? Any updates on my status? And so they denied me for two reasons: childhood asthma, and then I had been a lifeguard and I had snapped my trigger finger during a rescue. I was a Boy Scout lifeguard. One of my students had got tangled up in the ropes of a sailboat, and he was a bigger kid. And so when I had him, I was trying to get him off on the dock. So I like flew my hand onto the dock as hard as I could to like propel myself and him onto the dock, and snap my finger in the process. And so those are the two things they needed to overcome. The trigger finger was easy. I could do this. They did that. But the childhood asthma was a long process. And even though I had no residual effects, it was all before the age of 12, they didn't care. And so it's about April now. I've applied to other schools. It doesn't always get to happen. And my mom shows up on my high school campus, which is, a high school kid. You love that when her parent shows up. My mom was on campus, and which you always want as a high school senior. And she said, you have to come home. The Naval Academy just called and they offered you admission. So I should note that I got my senator's nomination for West Point, and I got my congressman's nomination for the Naval Academy and Air Force Academy. I knew I didn't want to go to Air Force Academy. I would have gone to Naval Academy because I had dreams of like being a Navy SEAL or something like that. But West Point was always my top choice. Like there wasn't close, right? So basically, Naval Academy had given me a waiver to go to West Point. They had accepted all the medical reviews and said, yep, you can go. But I had to decide by 5:00 that day. And it was like 3:00 in the afternoon. So I drove home, and the first person I called was West Point. And my admissions officer at that time was Major Daddis. And I said, hey, sir, Naval Academy just called me. They're giving me a slot. I have like an hour and a half now to decide. I said, I don't want to go. I want to go to West Point. But if I'm not given an offer right now, I'm not turning it down. He put me on hold for 15 minutes, came back on the phone and said, you can tell those Navy dogs you'll be wearing cadet gray in July. And that's how I got in. So I'm always indebted to the Naval Academy because I think they pushed West Point to accept me in that moment. But it was about a 15 minutes, and whatever magic he worked, I'm forever in debt to this man that I don't think I've ever met. I've kept his name in my head for a long time. And yeah, whatever magic he worked, he did. And that's what allowed me to get in. And my wife had a very similar issue. She had to get a waiver as well. But she applied to all the academies, and she only wanted to go to West Point. Like that was the only place we wanted to be. So we felt very lucky. Independent, we didn't know each other at the time, but to be able to go there. So it was a long process to get in. And even then I was, not sure if I would live up to the standards that I thought were going to be there.
Wow.
It's a long story, I know, but it's one that is, it's drilled in my head from that. It was a very stressful time. They've gotten in, lose it, and then just be in this middle ground for 4 months, 3 months, really, trying to figure out what am I going to do if I don't go there. I'd applied to Marine Corps ROTC, other ROTC programs. And yeah, it was very stressful.
I love that you share it because, just hearing that you went to West Point, okay, that's interesting enough. I don't think I know anybody else that went there. But then to hear about the journey and the struggle, that always matters to me. Because a lot of times you look at, Dr. Charn McAllister, right? You look at the accomplishment, but the journey is where so many of those lessons are learned.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of, when you do that, it's kind of like when you tell your kids, like, you got to put the practice in, right? Because when you get to the match or whatever competition it's going to be, all of that comes back to you and you have that confidence, right? I don't know if I necessarily had the confidence right away. I was definitely nervous. I knew I was prepared. But again, I held all the cadets that I'd seen, whether it be at the Army Navy games or in the newspaper, magazines. I'd looked up everything about West. This is very early internet, so there wasn't a ton of information. But I had every photo West Point had posted, I was trying to look at and like, could I do this? And so it gave me a lot of confidence, having struggled to like, you're going to get through this because you worked your butt off to get to this spot. So I think that matters.
There's no quit in you at that point.
There wasn't. If we're going to be as authentic as possible, I think I've told you that idealism is a common theme in my life, and both being disappointed with my idealistic views and sometimes being maybe a little bit naive because of them. I learned very quickly that cadets are human, and that's why I got in, right? Because I'm human, right? And I'm not perfect. I was never what I thought the cadets were going to be. because I was 17, 18, and I had this very idealistic view, just like we have an idealistic view of what the perfect firefighter is or the perfect soldier is. And if I'm being very honest, I mean, West Point is a wonderful place full of wonderful people, but they're not perfect. And I did have some doubts my first year because there were incidents where I was like, oh, like, this is not leading with character and this is not integrity. I'm not sure how all those people graduated. They were above me in leadership positions. And it wasn't necessarily the hazing. It was just some behaviors that I was just like, I don't know if this is the right place. And actually made me doubt it because I think it was my first dose of reality of idealism being shattered, right? Of like, I had this image of what this is going to be. And there was some shattering there. Not that it's not a great place, but there's no perfect people in the world. And
Absolutely.
that's why I was so worried about being there, because I knew I wasn't a perfect person. And I was like, how can I be there with all these perfect people? And it sounds dumb at 40 to think back, but that's how idealistic I was. And somewhat, I still hold on to a lot. I try very hard to hold on to a lot of that idealism. And West Point shaped a lot of that. I stayed pretty idealistic while I was there, but I realized that there was still some bad in the world, and that's just kind of part of it. And you just got to cope with it, which shouldn't take till you're 18 to figure that out. But I just held this group in such high regard that I wasn't expecting that. And so there was some doubts my freshman year, but it was mainly due to the way some of the behavior was, I guess. Yeah.
Before we started talking, you mentioned the ethics. What was that called?
Ethics Bowl.
Ethics Bowl.
Yeah.
Do you think, and I'd like to get into that at some point, but do you think that any of those moments might have helped shape or encourage you to get into training on ethics and helping kids understand what that means? And
yeah, I mean, yes and no. For me, this is a moment I think we all go through when our idealism is shattered, right? And we think that we start to realize that there is just bad in the world. And some of us learned at a much younger age. I'll say there were, the main thing that made me study ethics was September 12th, not September 11th. So September 11th happened, my plebe year. So I'd only been at the academy now for 2 months.
wow.
I think we started July 3rd of 2001. And your first basic training is like 6 or 7 weeks long. Then you move right into classes right after that. So you spend your first summer there. So I'd probably been in classes for a couple weeks. And I can remember walking through the halls on September 11th and the TVs were on. You know, New York City is just a quick hop down the road from West Point. And it was one of the only times that West Point canceled classes that day, because there was, you never know what it was, but at the time there was like, well, there's a list of possible targets, and if New York City was one of the targets, possibly West Point's target. So there was all these things going on. Obviously nothing came of it, but on September 12th, my tactical officer, who every company at West Point, of which there were 32 at the time, has a captain or a major assigned to it, who's the officer responsible for all the cadets, right? And mine was at the time Captain John Strange. And on September 12th at morning formation, he essentially said, everyone here needs to decide over the next ever many years or months until you graduate, because it was from freshman through senior in this formation, if you are going to be able to pull the trigger when the time comes, because we are going to war. And I think for me, that was one of the most important things that was ever said to me in my life, because it was at that moment in my plebe year where I understood how important ethics were going to be, and making a decision early on, can you do this? And not like the high school, like I just want to be in the Army and I want to do whatever my country needs me to do or whatever it may be. This was like, became real very fast. And so that was the moment in time in my life when I was like, I need to determine what I am comfortable doing and what my ethical basis and foundations will be for how I make these decisions as a leader, as an officer, or someone who might be giving the order for other people to do this. And so the best part of that story, though, is that I actually ran into then Lieutenant Colonel Strange in Iraq years and years later in a cafeteria when I'd flown to a different base, ran into him in line, and it was funny. He had lost some of his hair. I had lost almost all my hair. And I was like, hey, sir, you got a different haircut. He's like, looks like you do too. Didn't miss a beat. But I thanked him then and there. I was like, I just want to say that was, going back now, it was probably 8 years earlier. I was like, thank you for what you said, because it gave me all the time in the world to understand what my ethical compass was before having to go into combat, right? Because I didn't deploy until 2007. So I had from 2001 to 2007 to do some real work. And West Point requires ethics classes, but I had my own study as well. And it was an important thing to be able to think about and full well know what was happening. Because while we were at West Point, obviously people were deploying almost immediately. We were having upperclassmen come back who had graduated. They had been killed, injured. My team leader, when I was a plebe, Derek Hines, was killed in action. So like these are people that we very much knew. And so you knew that this was very real. This is a very real thing. And so I'm always in debt to him. I have to say that was really part of the moment when I started to learn my ethics, to the point about plebe year and having some difficulties with whether this was the right place for me based on what this illusion of perfection I had was. That was probably my first journey of learning to accept that you can live up to whatever standard you want to. You don't have to, if someone's standard isn't meeting your own, you make your own standard and you live to that. I think that's what I learned there.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So man, what a time to be in. Because, my own experience in basic training was like most, right? But we weren't at war.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we had been at war since Desert Storm.
Sure. Early 90s.
Yeah. And this is late 90s now. And, it's kind of that downturn. But I still don't know the whole story, but I think they tried to convince us. We didn't have any contact with the outside world other than the occasional phone call.
Sure.
And at some point in training, they tried to simulate or make us believe that we were going to actually be going to war. It was kind of like one of those games they play.
Sure.
And I think they were kind of trying to see our reactions, but also try to get us in a mindset of, hey, this could happen at any time. And then, but that was very simulated. And you could pretty quickly catch on that that's not going to happen, or that's not happening currently in the outside world. And yet, when you experienced it, that was a real deal. Like,
yeah, it was definitely a switch for a lot of people. I mean, West Point's been around since 1802. The whole goal, there was a mission at the time, which was to train leaders of character committed to a lifetime of selfless service to the nation. Was their mission then? It's changed a little bit since then. Because I was an idealist, like I looked at it like this was my job. Like I had been given a very good childhood by my family. I was raised by a single mom, but by my country as well. Like, and so I had a really big sense of service. Like that was a big thing for me. And so I'd been an Eagle Scout. I had done, all the kind of service activities in high school, and I felt really committed to the country. And so I went with that reason in mind. And so this didn't change much for me in sense of like, other than like, I had to really think about it. Like, cause it's so hard to think about 18-year-old Charn, who was just so like, oh, I'm going to go and save the world and I'm going to do all these crazy things. Right. And then it becomes real, I guess. There are definitely some people who go to the academies and still do because it's a great education and it's a free education. Right. So you don't pay to go there. That's why your congressman or senator nominates you. Tax dollars pay for it. It's about at the time, it was $250,000 education.
Wow.
That you get free of charge, and they actually pay you to be there. You get a wage. Right. I do think it did surprise some people and brought into stark relief what we could be doing. Right. So I had lived in New York. And so I actually went to the ticker tape parade when the soldiers came back from Desert Storm. And my mom had a friend who had been in Desert Storm. He actually gave me what now I know is an ARCOM, like the medal for an Army Commendation Medal. And so that was my only connection to it, though, right? I think some people had that tentative of connection, but really wanted to go the route of, well, if I go to West Point and do 5 quick years, then I could do something else, which is not common, but there was two there. I think we probably lost some people, is my guess at that time. But it was so early in my cadet career, I wouldn't have been able to identify them. But, we lost roughly 300 people over the course of our time there. And these were all pretty talented people that probably could have stayed,
Yeah.
So I do think that moment in time changed things.
I'm sure it just really shifts the mindset for a number of people anyway.
Yeah. I mean,
the gut check.
It's a gut check for sure. Cause I think the moment, even then, you're 18 and you're just dumb. Not that 18-year-olds are dumb, but I was a dumb 18-year-old. And it really was when you started hearing about people that you had just seen a year early being wounded or killed in combat. Like that's when you were like, oh, like this is happening right now. And people that I was on the cycling team with, one of the cadets who came after me. So this was not while I was West Point, but he lost both his legs and he was a cyclist, you know? But we heard that, and you see these stories of these terrible things happening. You're like, this is very real, and it's happening right now. So yeah, I mean, I think that was the real change when you start to feel that. And it's probably the same for the country too. It's like, oh, we're going to war. And it's like, for most people, it's like, okay, like, you know, then you start to see the human cost. And that's when I think society and the country starts to feel like, oh, this is a real thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that your mindset was more focused through the rest of school?
Well, yes, in the sense that I really wanted to graduate. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. West Point was very hard for me academically. So West Point accepts you on like, and they grade you on 3 major areas: academic, military, and physical, right? I struggled academically. I mean, I ended up on the dean's list towards the end, but I had to work my butt off. It is an engineering school, and I'm an English person, right? So like your first 2 years, the classes are all laid out for you. Calc 1 or discrete dynamical systems, whatever that is, calculus 1, calculus 2, chemistry, physics-based calculus, like all these things are there because it is an engineering school. Everyone graduates with some engineering or engineering adjacent degree in some way, shape, or form. So like mine was in engineering psychology. Couldn't just be psychology, had to be engineering psychology. And so I struggled to be able to finish and get through all the academics. Physically and militarily, I was like top of my game, right? I was making it happen. So was I focused? Yes, but I was also trying to survive. I think most people try to survive at West Point. One thing that West Point does well is it finds everyone's weakness and it exploits it. And you have one of the sayings amongst cadets is cooperate and graduate. So an example was my friend Andy. She was just smart, just so smart. And I happened to be in 2 classes with her, both a math class and chemistry. And at West Point, even still, the class sizes are very small, like 14, 15 people, and you do all your work on chalkboards, right? And so they say, take boards, you get up and you solve the problem, and the professor is watching you, right? And I'm just there looking at Andy, like following along with what she's doing. And this guy, this captain, then major, knew I had no idea what I was doing. He's like, Cadet McAllister, can you explain your work? I'm like, I didn't say this, but I was like, I can. Can you just ask Cadet or Travis over here to explain it? Because I'm just looking at her and trying to figure out what's going on. So the funny thing though is she would attest to this, that she was not a great runner, right? And so like physically she was falling behind, and so like I would help her with running. She helped me with chemistry, and that story is ubiquitous for every cadet. Every cadet had something that they had problems with. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult enough that I remember kids who just had straight A's their whole life. One of our first computer science tests, I think we all got F's and D's, right? And one kid got a C, and he was like devastated. And I was like, dude, you're going to be fine. Like, we all did poorly. This is clearly part of the game. As you know from basic, this is kind of that. And they found a way to break everyone down at some point. Everyone gets broken down. The problem with West Point is it's somewhat 4 years of breaking you down, but it also helps in many ways because you learn how to overcome and how to work with other people. And I don't think anyone sails through it. Maybe there's that rare unicorn that sails through West Point. I don't know who they are. I didn't meet many of them. Everyone has some difficulties along the way, which is probably a good thing. That's why I think our class reunions are so strong, because you remember that person who helps you out of this jam, or how you help them, or some crazy story that happened that you did to relieve stress.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, it's genius in a way.
Yeah, evil genius, but yeah.
Right? It kind of forces you into teamwork, teaching you that that's the only way to succeed is as the team.
Yeah, I don't know how many people can survive on their own. Yeah. I mean, that's
wild,
crazy. Yeah.
All right, so pivoting out of that,
sure.
graduate. And how did you get into being a helicopter pilot?
Yeah, so I got lucky. I'll say I want to go back to your self-made idea. So at West Point, they have what's called branch night, which is when you open up an envelope and you find out what branch of the Army you're going into. So, aviation, infantry, MI, whatever it is. Before that, you rank every branch of the Army from highest to lowest, what you want the most. And then based on what they call your QPA, which is not a GPA, it's your military, physical, and academic all together, they give you your class rank.
Okay.
And then they say, all right, this year we need 110 infantry officers, we need 100 aviation officers, maybe 100 armor officers, and then we need, 35 MI, 5 finance people, whatever it was. And it used to be 80% of the men of West Point had to go into combat arms. It's probably men and women now. I don't know what the status is now. So huge for the combat arms and smaller for other ones. But the most competitive at that time was infantry and aviation. Everyone wanted to go infantry because everyone was super motivated for getting deployed. And then aviation's always like a hot item. And so I was lucky enough that my number got pulled for aviation. So I was able to get aviation out of that. And leading up to that, though, I'd always wanted to go infantry or special forces. That's what I thought. And I had 3 interactions that I think really shaped who I was and who made me to that point, right? So one, I had a leader who I really did not respect very much. And he was like, you were totally made for infantry. Like, you would fit in perfectly. And I was like, I don't know. Cause I'm not really digging your leadership style. And then I had another infantry officer who was one of my mentors, and he was like, you don't want to go aviation. It's like herding cats. Like they're not real soldiers. And I was like, I don't like that like perspective either. Not that he was necessarily wrong. It's warrant officers are a different beast. They're my favorite people. But, and then I had my social, they call it Soc, and, my professor, and this is one of the best things about West Point, you should get these amazing officers. This was, at the time, Major Jason Amarine, who was one of the first Green Berets in Afghanistan, super decorated soldier. They were making a G.I. Joe figure out of him at the time.
Wow.
After he went to academia and then he went into CIA Special Activities Division. Like, this guy has this incredible career. I mean, like one of the Green Berets of the world, right? And probably more than that. And so here's this guy who was everything I wanted to be. Infantry, Ranger, Green Beret, probably Delta, all those things along the way. He was like, I always thought being a pilot would be one of the best things. It's like, he went to West Point too. He's like, I thought about going aviation. He's like, that'd be a really cool thing to do. He's like, infantry would be great too, but like, I always thought about being a pilot. And it was such an interesting perspective because here's this person who was everything I wanted to be. But I was starting to toy with this idea of aviation. I thought it'd be a really cool experience. And I'd never wanted to be a pilot. It just kind of came together. And it was almost like, do what you think is best. Don't just do what you've always wanted to do because that's what you thought. Now you know more, right? Mm-hmm. And these 3 conversations really shifted me towards aviation. And I have a lot of friends who went infantry, wonderful branch, obviously. Aviation's motto is above the best, which means we're above the infantry, right? I mean, and I love that. And yeah, so that's how I ended up at Fort Rucker, Alabama, and going to flight school. And then it's very competitive to get your airframe there. So you go through a basic training on aviation, right? You learn on a TH6 at the time, a TH-67, a training helicopter 67 essentially. And then based on your scores of like a 6 to 7 month window, you get your aircraft. But it's the same thing. You walk into a room and then they call you up by class rank. And then they basically have on the board, like maybe there's 30 people in a class. You have like 24 Blackhawks, 2 Chinooks, 2 Apaches, and 2 Kiowas. And all I wanted to fly was a Kiowa. And be honest, if I knock on a Kiowa, my heart was going to be broken. Like, that's all I wanted. And so when I walked in there were 3 Kiowa slots. But I had been very smart earlier. I found the smartest girl in my class. We became stick buddies. She was number 1. I was number 2. And so we were both able to get our aircraft. Now, she wanted a Blackhawk, so she was good either way. But she was just brilliant, great pilot. And we were able to study together, work together, do our tests essentially together.
Is that what a stick buddy is?
Yeah, I'm sorry, stick buddy. Yeah.
Okay.
So you everyone was kind of picked up their stick buddy. So like in the simulator, we would always be flying together, and we spent a lot of time together. And she was just a rock star. I recognized this immediately. So when it came time to pick stick buddies, I was like, hey, so in terms of self-made, like I had a rock star on my team, and that got me to number 2 in the class, which allowed me to get the Kiowa, whereas she was just the best. I mean, she was just way better than me, but she would help hold me along. Yeah, she chose Blackhawk, so she was good to go either way, but she was just that good all the time. And so I was lucky enough to get a Kiowa, and
That's awesome.
yeah, and that's all I wanted.
So what, help me understand Kiowa. I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, so Kiowa is a scout reconnaissance platform. So it's a 2-seater helicopter, right? So it looks like a Bell Jet Ranger, like what you think of for like news station helicopters, right?
Yeah.
The Army version has all avionics, so there's no back seat. It's just the 2 seats, right? You are super close to each other. I mean, you are like in there and you're almost touching. Like we went to the Velcro patches, right? And like your patches are touching the other, like your shoulders will like push together. It's an armed helicopter. It can be armed with a 50 caliber machine gun, hydro rockets, or Hellfire missiles. And then on the top, its most distinct feature is it has a large ball on the top with 2 eyes on it that kind of look like one big eye and one little eye, and people do some like graphics with it. And that's like a thermal sensor and then just a normal camera. And that's how you are able to do reconnaissance. It was designed, and these are all airframes from like the 60s. They were built. So you think about like Vietnam era and then Cold War era. So the idea was you could, as a helicopter pilot, as opposed to exposing your whole helicopter over a terrain feature, you could just lift up just so that ball was peeking up over a mountain or anything like that. So it was all for reconnaissance, right? That was the idea. In the Vietnam era, it was not armed. It began with just an aircraft that was really just for observing and scouting. And so back in Vietnam, it would troll for fire. It would try to intentionally get shot at. They'd be on the radio with Apaches who would then come in and strafe, right? I'm not sorry, Apaches, Cobras, who would come in and strafe the targets at that point. If the stories are to be believed, during Desert Storm, people started like some of the avionics and crew members started somehow like putting some kind of weaponry onto the aircraft. And then it became official after that. If that history is true, I just chose to believe it. Never really did the research. I would say our primary weapons though is there's no doors on the aircraft for 90% of the flights. You can put doors on. I would say maybe it was 99% of flights we didn't fly with doors. So you had your rifle on the dashboard. So you're able to shoot out the door, which I think was the most important part of that aircraft, because at Apache, you're completely enclosed. And although they have the best weapon systems, the most advanced aircraft, yada, yada, they can't not stop someone in a non-lethal manner, right? A helicopter is imposing as it is, but it's different to have a helicopter pointing at you than having a rifle pointing at you. It just seems more like personal. And so in Iraq, Kiowas were able to go to people who were fleeing, vehicles that were fleeing. We could fly in front of them, put the aircraft to the side, and then our left seater, who was usually not flying, could point their rifle at the person. People will stop when they see a rifle pointed at them, even though there's bigger weapons on the side. I think there's something psychological about looking at someone pointing a rifle at you. So I would say, obviously I'm biased towards Kiowas, no shame to Apache pilots, but we did fly a lot more hours than them because our aircrafts don't break. Apaches are the most advanced aircraft in the world, but they don't do well in sand because it's all electronic, right? Kiowas are all mechanical linkages. You have to fly that thing. Like the way that a Kiowa attacks the target, if here's our target, Kiowas fly towards the target, pitch up, essentially stall, let the aircraft nose come down, and you shoot at the target, and then right before you're to smash it in the ground, you pull out, right? And that's how we do it. So like when I would get into the Kiowa, everyone would know their sight picture. So I would get in the seat, and then there was a grease pencil that we kept on the dashboard, right? And I would count, for me, it was 6 rivets on the windshield or windscreen, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then I would take a guess where I think my bullets would land, and I would just take a grease pencil. I would put a little dot on my windscreen, and then you'd go to the range and test fire. And if you were wrong, you just do this, you do it again. So danger close for a Kiowa was 200 meters. You don't want to fire that close to friendlies because, the bullets are going a lot of different places.
Yeah.
And the closer you go, the more accurate it is, but also then you got to pull out. And that's why a lot of Kiowas unfortunately crashed in Afghanistan. Elevation, heat, and then you kind of mush through and right into the ground. So long story short, Kiowa scout reconnaissance platform. Part of the mission was to attack targets of opportunity along the way. It's a long answer. Sorry.
So no, it's fascinating me. So original mission, I I think I could put it together, but can you explain like what a mission would look like?
Yeah. So main mission, defend Allied forces, right? And so what that looked like in Iraq was mainly flying over convoys that were going from point A to point B, protecting units that were assaulting villages, doing battle damage assessments after like Air Force may come in and drop like a JDAM, like some kind of a bomb on a encampment, whatever it may be, and we just do like a battle damage assessment. What I loved about Kiowas is that when we were going to go and support an infantry unit, we would fly to their base and we would land. Apaches don't land at other people's bases, right? We land, we would get out, and we would be in the TOF, the Tactical Operations Center, and planning with the infantry guys like on the ground. Okay, so I love that about like we are scouts. We're part of the cavalry. We brought our Stetsons on every mission. My Stetson that I have at home was on my dashboard for every mission, right? Like it's a cool part of that. I love that tradition. So we planned with the soldiers, with the infantry unit, then we would get up and protect them. At the time in 2007, I would say like Iraq was still a war at that time, as opposed to like 2010 when it was more of like a police operation. And in 2007, because we were still relatively new, most convoys did not get attacked when helicopters were overhead. If the intelligence was to be believed that I was told, it was that a lot of the Iraqi people at the time, because we had gloves on, we had helmets that often had face masks, you couldn't see any skin, and they thought that there were like robots flying these helicopters that had like perfect vision, right? Or whoever was flying these helicopters did not look human. And so there was a worry that if you set off an IED that was not on a timer, that the pilots or these helicopters would find you, right? So often our presence over convoys would lead to a lack of attacks on the convoys themselves. So just being there. So we flew low. I flew almost nothing in between my two deployments. I flew, I think, 1,400 or 1,500 hours in my first deployment, and it was a blast. There's very few power lines in Iraq, which is a big worry for helicopters, right? Because as you get low, the power lines blend in with the horizon, so you can't see them. In Iraq, I was 2 feet off the road, right? In some cases. I mean, you could look inside people's vehicles. You were so low, right? Wow. And that's just a blast, right? That kind of flying. You get back home, and one of the reasons I never really cared to keep up my flight status here was there's just roads in the sky, and it's cool if you dig that, but like it was like just having no rules in terms of flight to going back to rules. Like I could never go back to it, right? Because you were just doing crazy things, and it was a blast. I was flying over Baghdad when they were doing the elections, and we were flying in some cases 5 feet off their roofs, because the worry was, if there was someone in an alleyway and you're up at 300 feet, they have this much space to hit you, right? They can see you. But if you're at 5 feet, they have this much window to see you and like half a second, right? Because the higher you are, the longer you're in their sight picture, right? And so we were flying low and fast. And then sometimes we'd go really high, because one thing I was on another podcast a couple of years ago, and the guest before me had said he felt like he was on missions just to have missions. And that was what a lot of my Baghdad flying was. It was during the elections. We always had to have helicopters in the air, not because there was much happening, just because they wanted that presence in the sky. So there were times when we were flying 6+ hours just in circles in the sky, and it was monotonous, and other times it was exciting. But Baghdad in particular was just flying for the sake of flying. But sometimes you get down low just to at least enjoy yourself. But yeah, so our mission was protecting Allied forces, protecting the convoys if they were attacked in any way, just to return fire.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. I had the opportunity to sit in one of your sessions after a panel that I was on, and you were talking about, if I remember right, there was a decision that had to be made. And you use that as an example in the classroom. Can you briefly share what, or not briefly? I mean, take a deep dive.
Yeah, no, happy to do it. Sure. So that's a story I tell my students every semester. I started telling it because a class I was teaching at another university, I had a student cheat on a quiz, and another student turned this person in. And to let her turn herself in, I sent an email to my class. And I said, whoever cheated has until the stroke of midnight to turn themselves in, or I'm going to make sure you're, out of this class and possibly have a permanent note in your file for the university. 5 people turned themselves in. 5 people have been cheating. It wasn't just the one person.
Wow.
And I learned a couple things. One, that was that idealism. Like, I just assumed no one would cheat. Like, why would you cheat? That was just a dumb thing. Still learning along the way. And the second was I started teaching this class on why character matters and why knowing what your values are and following through matters. So on my 3rd day in Iraq, we hadn't even replaced the unit we were ripping with, which at that time was 10th Mountain. Myself and another pilot were flying over a town called Hawija. People shot at us. We shot back. And in that moment, I'd been in Iraq for 3 days, and you're already in a firefight, and you're like, oh, like, this is what I thought would be. And as a platoon leader, especially I was a young first lieutenant with leading pilots who had already been to Iraq before, with part of 3rd ACR, which was a unit we had been before I was there with 1st Infantry Division. You want to get that respect from your fellow pilots and the ones that you're leading. So every platoon leader wanted to have that, and I got it the 3rd day. I got my combat action badge. I got an air medal, all these things. Like, and I tell my students, ego's the enemy, but like my ego is a little high, and I'm like, this is it, right? Now people want to fly with Lieutenant McAllister. He's making good decisions, right? So I felt like this is good. I want to do this again. It was not like, as a pilot, you have so much more control over the battlefield. The infantry guys, they just have to react, right? As a pilot, you have time to develop a situation because you do have a lot of time up there. And so a lot of situations we could stop without even having to shoot. As I mentioned before, we could interdict and we could stop, whatever it may be. People who are fleeing the scene, people who are suspected of maybe having like a suicide vest on. We pointed a rifle at one guy, and I just like tried to give him signals of like, take off your shirt, and basically got this guy to take off all of his top, just to show he didn't have a vest on. Like, that was the kind of thing we were able to do. So it wasn't as exciting as that first 3 days was going to be, but there were situations along the way. And the one that I tell in that class in particular was, we were given a call that there was a infantry unit that was assaulting a village where they had a suspected IED manufacturer. And we just happened to be in the area. And as they were driving in to this village, which was surrounded by wadis, which are like impassable terrain. So these huge military vehicles like MRAPs could only get in and out on one road. And as they walked in, or they drove in, there were 2 people on the side of the road with shovels. And at that time, shovels were a bad thing. Like, every military-aged male in Iraq carries an AK-47. It's just what it is. That's not a big deal when you see that. When you see the shovels, because we had told them, like, don't carry shovels. Like, it looks like you're placing IEDs. Mm-hmm. So here they're going to this village. It's 2-3 in the morning, and they're on the side of the road digging. It just doesn't look good. And so I get the call over the radio. I was the air mission commander for my scout weapons team, and my call sign was Crusader 16. I'm like, hey, Crusader 16, this is so-and-so. There are 2 people on the side of the road. Kill them. Now, that is not how we communicate on the radio. Kill them is not a legal order. Everyone's had some kind of situation like that, but like, that's the kind of thing that I was fortunate it was said that way, because it makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Like, it already doesn't feel good. Okay. So we fly over to where these people are, and we know about how high we can fly and how far away we can fly to make sure they can't hear us or see us. There was no moon that night, so we don't have to worry about being silhouetted by the moon. And so I'm using the sight to look at these people. Now, our sight that I mentioned earlier, like as thermal sights, it's not great. It's not like Call of Duty when you're playing the game and everything's like perfect, right? Our night vision goggles are perfect, but the sight is not perfect by any means. And just to make the story, more succinct, these people are on the side of the road, they're digging, and then they're stepping away, and then they take something out of their truck and they put something on the ground in or next to the hole. That's as much as I can see on the thermals. That is hot. Now, I went to a demolition school in 2003 called Sapper School, and bombs aren't hot, right? They're just normal until they explode, right? So I don't know what this is, but it's concerning me. The commander of the infantry unit is like, I don't hear anything. Like, why have you not accomplished the task I've given you? And like, he's not my commander. He is a high rank officer in this case, but I'm not jumping on this at the moment. And so still developing the situation. There is a time constraint though, because they are eventually going to finish this raid and they're going to have to lead. And if they've been placed an IED in the road, that's going to endanger the infantry soldiers' lives. We're going to have to call it EOD, right? It's going to endanger that soldier's life. And while EOD is coming out, which is going to take hours, these people are sitting ducks. And you know that their cell phone call is going to go off. And be like, these people are just sitting ducks here. So there's a lot of pressure. And as I say in that class, I had a lot of values in my head. I knew the scout law, trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, all those kind of things. I had all these values: West Point, duty, honor, country. My mom had taught me respect for all people. She'd been a nurse, didn't care who you were. She was going to treat you and take care of you. I had all these values bounced around. I had the Army's values: leadership, loyalty, duty, respect, self-service, so on and so on. And I'm trying to like balance all these in my head, and I can't. Like, I don't know what is the right thing to do here. And I'm lucky that I have all this time, right? This is one of the things I feel most fortunate about having been a pilot, is that I had time to develop the situation. Still a young officer, trying to do the right thing. And my co-pilot and I have a conversation. A man I greatly respect. Even at that point, I'd only known him for a short while, but just incredible. Have this conversation. He said, basically, you get this job done, we're going to go home, we're going to get medals, but you have to live with your choice. And that's kind of what I needed to hear, right? Like, I mean, I knew this, but I needed to hear what he was saying. And so I decided that it was better to jeopardize ourselves, our aircraft and our bodies, than to risk making the wrong decision. Because our night vision goggles are so good, we decide that we're going to unmask, which means they can hear us and see us, and we're going to fly up and then directly over top, bank the aircraft to the left. I'll be in the lead aircraft and I'll be the one looking at them. I'll have my rifle out, but I'll have my night vision goggles, and those are impeccable images. And I'm hoping that in that fast swipe, I'll be able to put the picture together, what they're doing, and the aircraft behind us will be providing cover. I fly over once and I know exactly what's happening. All right, it's very clear. These two people are farmers, right? And they're irrigating their crops. You got to remember, this is Iraq. It's like 2 a.m. If they're doing this at 2 p.m, it's like Phoenix, right? It's 100+ degrees, and it sucks. No one wants to be digging ditches and irrigating, right? So instead, they're out at 2 a.m. trying to just do right by their family, and that's what they're doing. They're digging, and then they'd step back and see where the water moved. These people are amazing at irrigating. When I first flew in Kirkuk, Iraq, in northern Iraq, I remember flying when you first get to Iraq, you fly super high because you don't want to get shot. And then after a month, you're flying low. And then before you go home, you fly really high again. It's like, I've been here for 13 months. I'm going to be up here.
Yeah.
I've made it this far.
No extra risk.
Yeah, no extra risk. But you would look down and you would see all these green dots when I first came. What are these green dots? They were growing watermelons. You just don't think about watermelons being grown in Iraq, but plenty of watermelons. Amazing at irrigation. That's all these two guys were doing. And so we made the right call. I told them, like, hey, these are not a threat. They're irrigating. The hot object was basically just like a Folgers can with some heat in it to keep themselves warm, because it was cold at 2 a.m. We're just like Phoenix, you get these huge swings, right? So I land the aircraft, and I'm pretty stoked. My other team had not been in combat yet, like an actual engagement, and they were the aircraft behind me, and they had been pushing for us to engage, and they were pretty content that we had made the right decision, because these were innocent people, and we made the right call. And I was pretty stoked. And I went into my headquarters, and I was verbally reprimanded for like 2 hours, not straight, but they brought in the battle captain, the S3, which is the operations officer and major. They brought in the XO, who was a major, and then they brought in the squadron commander, who was lieutenant colonel, to yell at me one at a time. And the major at that time, the S3, and he was the S3, he was a little bit shorter than me. I'm not the tallest guy. I'm 5'9". He's a little bit shorter than me. he probably had issues himself being that small, but when an officer stands up, you stand up as well. So you have to understand the way this room was set up was you or him, I'm here, and then all my pilots are behind you. Warrant officers are a different breed, right? They don't put up with crap. And so he can't see them. And every time he says something that's ridiculous, they're like, oh, and I'm having to be here, like keep my military bearing. Well, they're like, this guy is an idiot. And I'm trying to keep my military bearing. He basically says to me, do you know how much money you put at risk by flying those aircraft over top? So each Kiowa at that point cost like $9 million, right? So that was when I stopped worrying or caring, because I was like, that's what you cared about. Like, you didn't think about the 4 lives I put at risk. Like, I put all 4 of us at risk for a good reason. I never thought about the airframes, right? And maybe that's just a lack of, maybe I was, because I was a company grade officer, I wasn't thinking strategically, but like, that was what you cared about, was the money, like the money before the people. And so this guy, as I'm telling you, he goes, would you make this decision again, Lieutenant McAllister? And I said, yes, sir. And he stands up, right? And so I stand up too, because when an officer stands up, you stand up. And he goes, oh, you want to fight me? Yeah, he's like, you want to fight me, Lieutenant McAllister? And my pilots are losing it, right? And I am trying to, like, I was like, thank God for West Point and the military bearing, because, like, I was trying to, I'm like, no, sir, you stood up, you're outranked me. And he was, like, hot, right? And you gotta remember, he showed up, he even pulled out of he was sleeping, he got pulled out to come yell at me. So his boots were undone, his shirt was unbloused, he just looked like a mess. And it was just a string of people, one after the other. Eventually my pilots left while I had to stay there. But that was the moment when he said that, when I was like, I made the right call. I'm fine with this. And that decision was important, because a lot of these were, if you've in Iraq, all the headquarters are just plywood, right? So everyone heard me getting yelled at. And I had a tendency to get yelled at a lot in the military for making decisions that I thought were ethically correct. And I got yelled at in front of a lot of soldiers. And that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because every time I got yelled at, it was for doing the right thing. And this is not like revisionist history, right? Like, I want to be very authentic about this. Like, my idealism and belief that as a leader, it is your job to take care of people has got me in trouble. I've recently, I think, kind of lost a friend over this, right? Because when you're a leader, I expect certain things from you, right? And I expect you to stand up for the people you're in charge of. And so that leader there, the lieutenant colonel, yelled at me there. He had yelled at me about 7 months earlier when we were at National Training Center, because my pilots were tired. We were flying a mission and the winds were out of tolerance. I forget what it was. I think it was like 45 or 50 for like a Kiowa, and you're supposed to land. And this is a training situation. If it was a real combat situation, you stay out there and you get the job done. Sure. And I call in the radio and say, hey, look, winds are out of tolerance. We're coming back. And they're like, the battle captain says, negative, Crusader 1-6, you cannot come back. And I say, no, like, we're coming back. S3 comes on. You are ordered to stay out there. I said, negative. Winds are out of tolerance. It's not worth risking my crew for this situation. Coming back. Sabre 6 gets on. The battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel. Crusader 1-6, you will stay out there and finish this mission. I say, negative, Sabre 6. Crusader 1-6 will come back in the land. Guy freaks out over the radio and is like, you will come into the headquarters right away. So I land and I come in my full gear. I'm still wearing my helmet, wearing my vest, everything. And in front of the entire headquarters, right, in the NTC, National Training Center, is just a big open bay. He just screams at me for like 10 minutes, right? This dude just lays into me. I did the right thing, and I knew I did the right thing, right? The next day, there were 2 Kiowas that crashed, right, due to winds and tired crew members, right, for a host of reasons I can go into.
In training. So
National Training Center is a 30-day situation. There's one in California, NTC, and then there's one in Polk, Louisiana called JRTC, and they are like mock war simulations. You spend like 10 days getting ready, and you spend 20 days in like a war game. You have like, it's like adult laser tag. You have laser tag like fitted onto your aircraft. The infantrymen have laser tags on their rifles. They have people acting as civilians. They speak the language. They put out newspapers. Like, it's this whole thing. All units, a whole brigade goes and works together, right? So you get to test. But the thing is, this is a huge part of promotion from lieutenant colonel to colonel and colonel to general. So it really matters. Like for everyone else, you're just learning, but they, especially before Iraq, like this was the way to make rank, right? And even then, doing well at JRC or NTC meant possibly getting colonel, right? And possibly going to brigade command. So they had a lot on the line. And so me saying that this is just a game, we're going to land. I'm not risking my pilots for a game. To them, it was their career, right? I got very lucky that every time I stood up to these people along the way, something usually happened after the fact that vindicated me. And I tell my students this, like, when you do the right thing, you got to be ready to pay the cost. I was very lucky in my career to not have to pay the cost, because I was usually vindicated. And what that ended up being was when we got back from Iraq, I was a captain, and to become a commander, you have to go to captain's career course. And my commander, of course, hated me, right? He had yelled at me at NTC. He had been very mad at me in Iraq, just across the board, and he was never going to let me be a commander. But he was changing command. And so a series of commanders worked together with the incoming commander to make me a company commander before I went to captain's career course. So I was the only commander in my brigade who had not gone to captain's career course. I was the youngest captain in my brigade to be a commander. And by the time I left, I never went to captain's career course. I had been in command for 3 years.
Wow.
And so we talk about self-made again. I was super fortunate to have a group of officers who were above me that were like, he will be a good commander. We're going to make this happen. And there was some self-interest too. One of them really wanted to switch bases, right? And they needed a commander. But getting a slot without captain's career course was a big deal in aviation at that time. And then to be able to have it for 3 years was a pretty massive thing. And it was all because these people got together, and behind the back of this squadron commander, I should say, because we were cavalry, as soon as he left, they put me, it was like within days when that person changed command, they announced me as the commander of Crusader troops. So I was the commander of the same unit. I'd been a platoon leader and an XO in, which never happened. You always shuffle them. And I had a lot of confidence because that one guy who was on that mission with me, who gave me the advice, he said, a lot of PLs can never do this, platoon leaders, but you had developed relationships with soldiers that were professional, but personal. And you're one of the only people who could step from platoon leader to a commander. That gave me a lot of confidence walking into it. So in terms of self-made, again, like I was given that opportunity by these people who believed in me, and this incoming commander who was like, I'm going to trust them. And the funniest thing was when I had my change of command ceremony, you wear your Stetson, I had a saber, and I'm cutting the cake with my saber. And I turn around and there's the old squadron commander. He had found out about it and came. Yeah. And he just said, congratulations. And then that was it. But like, it wasn't a friendly exchange, right? It was just like, I know. And I was like, thanks, sir. But he was gone at that point. There's nothing you could do.
Wow.
So it was an interesting experience.
That is. I mean, there's so much to unpack.
Yeah. Sorry. That's a long story.
But, they're just the way that he cared about the aircraft. It's just really, there's a number of things saying about one is he cared about the aircraft in Iraq on that mission, a real mission.
Yes.
Sounds like he didn't give a crap about the aircraft or the people.
I don't think he ever did
in training because he just wanted rank.
I had one of the senior warrants in my squadron came up to me. My troop was very close. We became a very close troop, and part of that was because I'd been a part of it for so long. But I had some really great pilots who were like really about this Crusader like mentality that we had, and so we actually had like T-shirts with our Crusader logo. We had hats. Like we were like pretty close family. And this one pilot came up to me at a restaurant, was like, our last commander, who was the one who was fine with pushing people in out of tolerance wind, was like, he would get us killed intentionally, like, and he wouldn't care about it. Like he would send us to die. One of the current commanders just wouldn't know he was stealing it, right? But that's more of an indictment of that guy. Before they knew that like he didn't care. He was there just solely to make rank.
Wow.
And it was very clear to the pilots, not just the officers. Like everyone knew what was going on.
Wow.
Yeah. So those are the kind of moments though that, I think shape who you are. And when I was thinking about the self-made last night and this morning before talking with you, like one thing I think is that we are made by those around us and those connections, but sometimes you have the last rites, those final touches of like, am I going to accept this, or how am I going to mold this experience and become someone that I want to be? And, I know it's a cliche to say we learn more from those that we don't like or that we don't admire than those that we do. But it's been a big thing for me. There were very few squadron commanders in my career that I looked up to, that I felt like lived up to what I would have wanted to do if I were in that position. But they still taught me a lot about what not to do.
Sure. And sometimes you just take that opposite path and it's the right path.
Absolutely.
Wow. I could talk to you the rest of the night, but I think if you're willing to come back whenever you love to dig into, post-military, getting into more academia, then giving back through teaching ultramarathon stuff, right? And then musician. There's a lot that I'd really like to just pick your brain.
Always happy to chat with you, man. Yeah.
But, I think this is a good stopping point for today. And man, I really appreciate you sharing.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, dude. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.